It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to the Penguins episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Go follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412 over on X, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We're on everything. Go check us out. Also, go check us out on YouTube if you're not already watching the show over there. We do post the full-length episodes of the shows as well as some clips of the show from time to time. So go check us out over there. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like on the videos and leave a comment if you want to ask some questions in the comments of stuff you want to know about any of the Pittsburgh sports teams or really anything in general. I'm sure Smitty and I will be happy enough to answer those on the show. So go check out our YouTube as well. Like I said, this is the Penguins episode. And honestly, for being a busy upcoming week for hockey in general, the Stanley Cup just wrapped up a few days ago with the Florida Panthers winning the Stanley Cup over the Edmonton Oilers. RIP McDavid getting a cup, although he did get the Conn Smythe. I actually want to get your thoughts on that when we start talking about the show. But also, we have the draft coming up for the NHL. And to be completely honest, we're just going to get this out there right now. Smitty and I do not know anything about anybody in where the Penguins are going to be drafting. They don't have a top pick. And typically that's really where the only prospects I actually know in the draft are, because I don't dive into the NHL draft like the NFL draft, for example, where I know people in the later rounds. I don't know anybody in the second round, and that's where the Penguins are going to be selecting first. So we're just going to get that out of the way right now. We don't know anything. We were just talking about before we started recording, maybe we'll have somebody on that after the draft to be able to talk about some of the prospects, shed more light on who the Penguins had selected. And then there's also free agency coming up July 1st. And depending on when we release these episodes, this might be coming out the morning of July 1st. So depending on how you're listening to this, the Penguins might be about to be making some moves, or in the coming days could be making some moves. We'll get into some people that we're interested in the Penguins talking about. But first, Stanley Cup wraps up. It has nothing to do with the Penguins, but I really want to get your thoughts because so many people seems like a polarizing topic. I mean, obviously, Florida Panthers won. Good for them. They lost last year, able to redeem themselves in like a Penguins fashion in 2008 and 2009. So cool for them to be able to do that. But then Connor McDavid wins the Conn Smythe Trophy, and listen, easily the best skater on the ice throughout the playoffs, throughout even that series, even though he didn't have a point in games 5 or 6. I understand that. But he did have 42 points. The next closest person on the Panthers when it comes to point total was Matthew Tkachuk, and he had 22 points. So I understand from a skater standpoint why he would get the nod there. There were a lot of people saying that Bob should have got it and Sergei Bobrovsky should have won the Conn Smythe for his performances, not just in the Stanley Cup final, but throughout the playoffs. So I just want to get your thoughts on that. What did you think about McDavid winning the Conn Smythe?
I mean, by definition, he deserved to be the Conn Smythe winner. But I think that this is, again, kind of where I have an issue with this being the award that is given out and the time that it is given out. Like, I think that there should be a Stanley Cup final MVP that is awarded to the most valuable player on the team that wins, as opposed to just a playoff MVP for the entire playoffs that could go to, because I get it. Far and away, Connor McDavid was the best player throughout the entirety of the playoffs, but his team lost, so I don't care at the end of the day. Yeah. And that might sound stupid, but at the end of the day, that's just my opinion of it. I think that they need to either change the award or give a second award for the best player on the team that actually won the Stanley Cup, as opposed to just a MVP of the entire playoffs that can be given to a player that did not win the cup. So by definition, Connor McDavid should have been Conn Smythe. Because they didn't win the cup, I don't care. And I don't think he cares either. You saw his reaction to it. Like he
didn't even come out to get the award from Gary Bettman.
Right. Yeah. So like, it's just such a weird spot. Like, what has there been, like 6 all time or something like that have done it?
The most recent one was that goalie back in 2003.
Tim Thomas? Oh, I thought Tim Thomas did it.
Did Tim Thomas do it?
But you're talking about with the Ducks. Dang it. why can't I could picture him right now, and he wore number 35.
I can picture him getting the award. I'm thinking of, I might butcher the last name, John Sebastian Giguère.
Yeah.
Thomas
Giguère
award in 2011, but the Bruins also won the Stanley Cup that year.
Oh, okay. Why did I think that was on a losing effort? All right, so it is Giguère is the most recent before this.
Yeah, back in 2003. So I mean, 21 years ago. Yeah, I agree with you too. Like McDavid, to me, like I said, if you're just looking at the skaters alone, and I know Bobrovsky has every right to be able to win that, and I would listen to the argument that he should have won it, and I don't necessarily think I would disagree with anybody that says Bobrovsky would have or should have won that award. But looking at the skaters alone, McDavid far and away the best skater in the playoffs. And when you compare him to his opponents, like I said, Tkachuk is the closest one with 20 less points than McDavid.
Yeah,
it's tough. It's a tough scene to have that happen. And even like, I don't remember whenever that happened in 2003 with the Ducks, but the closest thing I can relate this to that I do remember, and I remember watching, is the World Cup final in 2014. Germany beats Argentina 1-0, and they win the World Cup. But Messi was named the World Cup MVP, and he has to go out and accept the trophy. And then, like you said, with McDavid, he did not care whatsoever about that award. That means nothing to them. It will be interesting, though, moving forward in McDavid's career, if this is the only playoff award he ever gets. What if he never makes it back to another Stanley Cup final, and he has one Conn Smythe Award winner at the end of his playing career, but never wins the Stanley Cup? That would be a unique and interesting resume to have as like a playoff player, because not many people could say that. And I do think, and I'm not saying you're one of them or I'm one of them, but I do think, speaking to our audience, the Pittsburgh fan base and the Penguins fan base audience, that there was some like a sigh of relief that McDavid did not win a Stanley Cup, because a lot of people won't want to talk about it, but I know for a fact that a lot of fans in the Pittsburgh area are going to be nervous when McDavid starts to win Stanley Cups, if he ever does. The fact that he didn't win one, I'm sure there was a sigh of relief.
It just seems so stupid to me, though. Like, I know what you're saying, and I'm sure that you're right, but that is so stupid. Like, I don't even know what, like, sensitive towards it. Like, why are we so guarded towards a potential thing that might happen with somebody that's not even us? It's Sidney Crosby. Like, I don't know. It's just a weird scenario and situation. Like, we're not there yet. Didn't win one. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Like, that's, you brought that up. It is kind of weird to think about. There's the chance that he doesn't get back there. I mean, literally, he could not have done anything more up until obviously go scoreless in Game 6 and Game 7, but he probably just ran out of gas with everything that he did, carrying the team on his back to even get to that point. Honestly, to me, Leon Draisaitl is the one that needed to step up more than he did down the stretch there. And obviously playing with some injuries, that stuff comes out after the season, as everybody is. But yeah, as far as like the Pittsburgh fans go, that's just such a weird conversation to me. I mean, I get it.
You know what I'm saying, right? Like, I know for a fact there are people that think that way. Even if they don't know they think that way, they subconsciously are so defensive of Sidney Crosby and his legacy that they're going to want a player like McDavid to lose, even if they don't realize it. And it's just subconscious effort that they just don't want anybody to come close to surpassing Sidney Crosby as far as like all-time greats go. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying either of us are that way. I just know that there is definitely a big handful of Penguins fans that feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, if we get there, we get there. We'll see.
Yeah, my main reason for the wanting or being happy that McDavid lost, not necessarily McDavid, but just the Oilers in general, is that the fact that we are still on a 31-year streak now of the Stanley Cup staying below the border and staying in the United States.
So to me, it was that. Plus, I just thought it was hilarious for them to come back from 3-0 just to lose Game 7 anyway. Like, it would have been way less funny if they got swept or lost sometime before Game 7.
Yeah.
And if you're an Edmonton fan, since we're throwing hypotheticals out there right now, would you have just rather lost in game 4?
Get swept or almost reverse sweep, but lose in game 7. That's tough.
Yeah. I would rather just I'd rather just lose in game 4. Maybe 5, just to say you didn't get swept. But like either at game 7, doing what happened, I think is the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I think so, because immediately my mind went to like 2000, what was it, 13, whenever the Penguins got swept in the Eastern Conference Final. Would I rather have potentially come back just ultimately to lose in game 7, or have it play out the way it did? I would have rather have it play out the way it did. So, but that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of 2013 season, Jerome McGinley on that team. Jerome McGinley's son got drafted tonight, 6th overall to the new Utah hockey franchise. So excited for him and them. But man, does that just go to show how old that we are. One of those moments, certainly, that makes you feel old. We did have one question related to the Penguins, and then, we want to dive into some like potential trade and free agent stuff. Matt said, why do the Penguins refuse to go into a rebuild? You're not winning another cup with Sid, Chris, and Malkin. Time to blow it up. I mean, the names that you listed are the exact reason that they're not, though. Like, because those guys have still played at a high enough level for them to feel like if we can put a supporting cast around these guys, it's still possible for this team to achieve that ultimate goal of winning a Stanley Cup. Those guys have still provided that type of play, or at least were up until last year. And I know that, we didn't see the same version of Gino, but I will contend once again that to me, it was more a product of the line mates that they were putting around him. I think that you saw a better version of him when they did go get Michael Bunting, and he did spend time with him on his line. I know Bunting was kind of flipping around whether he was playing up with Sid or playing with Gino. I'm curious to see what ultimately is the home for Michael Bunting within the top 6. But yeah, to me, the answer is as simple as saying that those guys on their own, those 3 are playing at a high enough level for them to feel like they still can contend for a Stanley Cup with those 3. Now, they have not done a good job of putting a supporting cast around them, which is all the more frustrating when you look at the salary that those guys are taking up, and it not being that much compared to other stars around the league. They've had every opportunity to build something around this team to go for a push. Like, that's why, again, my ultimate point here with being so frustrated about the way that things have kind of gone over the last few years is if the Stars would have just crashed and burned, and that's why, the playoff streak ended and the window closed on this core, then so be it, because that's typically the way that those things go. But that's not what happened here. We watched this team not be able to put the right structure around a core that is still producing and not have that secondary element. So that is, to me, the most frustrating part about the end of Hextall's tenure and beginning of Kyle Dubas's tenure is with those guys producing, they still haven't put a formidable product on the ice.
I agree with everything you said. I don't think that you can fully dive into a rebuild with the Stars producing like they are. With Sidney Crosby having 94 points last year, even with Evgeny Malkin not having like a point per game place like he has in the past, he still was a productive player. And when he has the right teammates on his wings, he can be even more productive and is at a point per game pace. And then when you look at Chris Letang has been better defensively than he has at certain parts of his career. And he's still an offensive weapon for this team. And then you added a guy like Erik Karlsson as well. I understand the thought process of just wanting to tear it down. I really do, because ultimately you just want to get out of this funk. You haven't made the playoffs the last 2 seasons. And that can be hard on a fan base. That can be hard on a franchise. And so while a lot of other franchises could have made other changes after missing the postseason 2 years in a row, the Penguins just simply aren't in a situation where that's really plausible. If you do that, you might as well trade Sidney Crosby. And that's never going to happen. So it's never going to happen if that's the case.
They had the
opportunity.
What would have had to have happened was Gino and Letang left in free agency the year that they re-upped both of them. Was that Hextall's last year? I think so.
Yeah, it was the year. Before he was fired. Yeah.
They would have had to have let both those guys hit free agency, or both those guys choose to hit free agency, and then at that point decide, okay, we know we're not going to re-sign Jake Guentzel. Maybe they'll do the Brian Rust deal or Rickard Rakell deal if you're even going to go that route. Like, I don't know. That offseason, they re-upped with everybody on 5 or 6 year contracts. They spent a lot of money. But yeah, maybe that would have been the route to go. And I don't know if they would have traded Sid. Maybe Sid would have gotten to the point where he wanted it to happen, watching everybody else leave. But I do think that it would have been entirely possible for them to just let him also play out his contract. So I don't know. But when you look at what those guys have still done, we're going to dive into, maybe some possible trades, as well as free agents. Who can they bring in here to actually be a game changer on this team? What's going on, everybody? Smitty from Around the 412, and I just want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our folks at Game Changers. Their logo on the screen right now, right above my microphone. Over 2,000 different designs in their catalog. Luxury heavyweight material. I am wearing one of their shirts right now. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Head over to gamechanger.la or pick6.la to pick up some shirts. And guess what? Use code AT412. Save yourself $10 on your order every single time. Again, gamechanger.la or pick6.la. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Check them out. The link to that will, of course, be in the description of the show. In the promo for that, I was wearing a Game Changer shirt. I'm also wearing a Game Changer shirt right now, Barry Bonds. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this. Big shout out to Game Changers. Maybe I did. If so, I'll mention it again. They sent me a free Ken Griffey Jr. t-shirt for my birthday this year. So love that company. Huge fan. Go check them out. Save yourself $10 using code AT412. But yeah, I mean, so we mentioned maybe not as adverse in the draft stuff as I would like to be. Although I do know, friend of the show, Jesse Marshall, as well as everybody I think in the Penguins community knows Jazz. Cat picture. You guys know who I'm talking about just based off that, I feel like at this point. Big John Mustard, guys. And when I hear that name, obviously, that's something that I can latch on to. So that's kind of my guy for one of that first of the second round picks, if he were to fall to that spot. So I will say that I know that name, and I've gotten a little bit acclimated with him. But we'll see how that plays out. I'm more intrigued to see, is Kyle Dubas going to have any activity on the trade front? We've heard Tristan Jarry's name thrown out there. We've obviously talked about, the Reilly Smith situation. We thought he was going to be traded last year at the deadline. You mentioned, knowing some things about his situation and not wanting to be in Pittsburgh. I've talked to some other people, and they told actually, without diving too much into this, I reached out to somebody about that same situation, and they expressed the same sentiment and told me that it wasn't like anything was promised necessarily, but they had a good feeling also that Dubas was going to move him at the deadline last year, and Reilly Smith felt like that was going to happen. Like, I'm not saying that he guaranteed Reilly Smith, hey, we'll move you at the deadline, but it seems like all parties thought that was very much on the table to happen at that time. And it didn't. And now here we are this much further down the line. I think he gets dealt before Monday. I just don't see a way that we get to this point, continuing to have him on the roster. I just think it's time for a fresh start for both parties. The Tristan Jarry one is the more interesting one. Going back to last week's conversation with re-upping with Alex Nedeljkovic, how to get Yoel Blomqvist's feet wet at the NHL level if you do run it back with Jarry and Nedeljkovic. And also we've seen some goalie trades take place recently to kind of give us like a blueprint of what that could look like. A Tristan Jarry trade, whether it's the Jacob Markstrom deal, the Linus Ullmark deal, there's been a couple of goalies moved now. So do we feel one way or another different from last week about the idea of a Tristan Jarry trade?
I feel pretty much the same that I do. I think that it probably should happen. I don't know that it's necessarily going to happen. I think out of the two players, Reilly Smith is by far the more likely to be traded. And just to add a note onto him, you say that you think it's going to be done by Monday. I would like to think that, but I'm wondering if they're for sure going to be trading him before free agency happens. Are they having trouble with suitors? Are they having trouble with some sort of return? Are they not liking a return they're getting? Personally, to me, I think the return that you're getting is the cap space, but that's neither here nor there. I don't know what Kyle Dubas is trying to get in some sort of return for Reilly Smith, but I wonder how many suitors they have, because when I look at this trade, if that's true that it's been talked about since during the season and potentially the trade deadline, him being moved, why hasn't it already happened? Why are we 2 days away, 3 days away from free agency and it hasn't happened yet? So maybe there's a chance that this could take longer. I mean, even past free agency, the start of free agency. Unfortunately, I don't want that to be the case, because I want to have that cap space opened up for July 1st. But regardless, I do think that he's the more likely of the two. I can't put a stamp of guarantee on it. Obviously, you never know, but I would be very surprised if the Penguins are going into like September and Reilly Smith was still on the roster. Tristan Jarry, on the other hand, he's trickier to figure out because goalies are just weird. They are weird people. They're a weird position. They have weird habits, and they're also weird when it comes to markets for goalie, who's going to be trading for goalies, because teams do not tend to value other teams starting goalies as much as you value your own. And that's why when you look at a goalie trade, I feel like the returning end of that can be very underwhelming. And I, again, look at the trade that you would be getting for Tristan Jarry, and I don't necessarily think I think it in the same light as Reilly Smith, where I solely just want the cap space. I think Tristan Jarry has more value, whether believe it or not. I think he has more value than a Reilly Smith would. And so I think you'd get at least a little bit more assets coming back to the Penguins. But at the same time, freeing up that cap space to be able to be used, that is something that's also super valuable to Kyle Dubas and the Penguins. I just think goalies are weird in a trade. You have to get the perfect partner in reality. And by perfect partner, I don't mean like they're going to get you the best deal or the perfect partner that Tristan Jarry is going to go there and be the best goalie for that team. You just have to get the perfect partner that they actually want to trade for a goalie, because in light of having some recent trades for goalies, like you just mentioned, Markstrom and Linus Ullmark, I don't know that they're as frequent as people, especially with starting goalies. I don't think they're as frequent as this offseason is just showing. So I think it's going to be more interesting to see if that one is the case. Like I said last week, I think that Jarry and Ned are both going to be here to start the season. And that's mainly because I don't know that Kyle Dubas is going to find a suitor for Tristan Jarry. And part of that is not just because I don't know how many teams will be interested in the goalie market, but also, like I kind of just mentioned, I do think Jarry holds a little bit more value than a player like Reilly Smith in a trade. And I don't think that he would trade Tristan Jarry away for nothing, because Tristan Jarry can win you games. He can be a viable goalie. The Penguins just have a terrible goalie situation, having just re-signed Nedeljkovic for another 2 years, and you kind of are stuck in your 1A, 1B scenario for what has seemed like years now. I feel like even going back to when Tristan Jarry came back with Matt Murray like 4 or 5 years ago, we've been having this conversation about Penguin goalies and having just a number one goalie and then finding a suitable backup. But we've been stuck in this having 1A, 1B scenario. And while that's a good thing in terms of like the health of the goalies and being able to balance like the starters' actual games started, I don't know that it's necessarily a good thing all the time to be competitive in the sense of having your starting goalie set in stone all the time, because we've seen with the way Tristan Jarry has gone down the stretch in the season, he's been a starting goalie for the Penguins. That's not always the case. And then the 1A, like we see last year, he plays too much. Ned, he did just fine, but as he was playing more as the starter, he started to wear it down. So I don't know. I think it will be really interesting to see if Tristan Jarry has moved on from. I'm not sure if he is, but I do think Reilly Smith, as much as I like him or would like him to be gone by July 1st, I'm also not sure about if he's going to be gone by July 1st, just for the sake of it being he's not already gone already.
The reason that I think Tristan Jarry is going to be traded is I understand what you're saying with the reason of, you don't see goalie trades all that often, which is exactly why I think that it needs to happen right now, because we're seeing teams actually make deals for goalies right now.
Yeah.
Strike while the iron is hot. And with Jussi Saros getting an extension in Nashville, taking him off the market, Detroit has been snooping around with Saros, John Gibson, and Tristan Jarry. Okay, Saros is off the market for them now. They got to pivot somewhere else. I think Tristan Jarry very much in play for Detroit. The Bruins, like we mentioned with the Linus Ullmark deal, they got forward Mark Kastelik, who I admittedly do not know much about, the goaltender Jonas Korpisalo, and the 2024 first-round pick, which is the 25th overall selection. let me pull up the details of the Jacob Markstrom trade. I know Kevin Ball was part of that trade. They also got a first-round pick. Were there other pieces in that?
I'm not entirely sure. If I'll be completely honest, off the top of my head, I'm not sure. Markstrom trade.
It might have just been Kevin Ball and first-round pick, I believe. First round.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And Kevin Ball was an NHL defenseman. That's literally all I can say about him. The defensive impacts are okay. Offensive is absolutely awful. So I guess like in a sheltered role, he could be an NHL player. But man, I mean, the first round pick is the reason both those deals were made, as well as the idea, Boston had to get out of, I guess, Allmark's salary, did something for him. You at least did a decent backup in Jonas Korpisalo, who did not pan out in Ottawa first year of his deal as well. That's another thing too. Like, we're talking about Tristan Jarry just being 1 year into his deal. Same situation for Korpisalo with Ottawa before they moved on. So there's also a precedent in that regard. I feel like Detroit makes a ton of sense. Honestly, though, okay, so if they do go a different route, say John Gibson is traded to Detroit, then I would start to question, is there a suitor out there for Tristan Jarry? So, I don't know where you pivot to if it's not there. Like, is a team like Edmonton so frustrated by the play that they got in net? Now, Stuart Skinner was admittedly way better towards the back end of that series for them to get back into it. But you could argue if he's even average in game 1, 2, or 3, the Oilers are raising the cup right now.
Yeah, that's true.
They did bring Calvin Pickard back, but I just wonder from the Stuart Skinner perspective, would they maybe look to start fresh in that regard?
Yeah, that could be a team. I'm curious to see what Detroit would value more. A year gone on a contract or a little over $1 million in cap space. Because Tristan Jarry, he has 4 years left on his deal, and his cap hit is $5.375 million. And John Gibson, he has 3 years left on his current deal, and his cap hit is $6.4 million. The stats and the actual play aside, Detroit would have to decide whether they want a 3 or 4 year contract, which if you get the 3 year contract, you're taking on over $1.1 million more. Or would you prefer to just have the Tristan Jarry contract where you do have to take on that contract for 1 more year, but you do save a little bit more cap space?
Probably saving the cap space, I think.
Yeah, and that's what I would think too, especially with Detroit. Yeah. Detroit getting to the point where they're probably going to start to push to try to be competitive.
I think so. I think they're a team to watch for Stamkos.
Yeah. Speaking of Stamkos, denying a 8-year contract at $3 million a year with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So it seems like he's not going back to the Lightning. That is a weird contract with me, because
it is very
you
odd.
never see like those like smaller cap hit numbers for like an 8-year contract. So the fact that it's $3 million 8 years and he doesn't want to do that, I don't think that he's going to get a better offer from Tampa Bay. So he's probably going to be leaving Tampa Bay.
It's funny because Elliot Friedman was on Pat McAfee and he was talking about Stamkos, and he said prior to like today, he kind of viewed the Stamkos situation like Gino a couple years ago, where it really seemed like Gino was going to hit free agency, and then literally the night before it came out that they came to a deal. So he was still expecting him to ultimately reach an agreement in Tampa, but with that contract thing coming out, I don't know. I think he's going to actually test the market, and I wouldn't be surprised if Detroit signs him. Steve Yzerman connection there. He was just out there golfing with a couple of players on the Red Wings, so I think it's possible that one happens.
Point. That's a good point.
But I want to talk about him. I want to talk about a couple other free agents, but first, say a little something about Keith's Barbershop. Smitty from Around the 412 here, and while I may not have much hair, the hair that I do have will not be cut by anybody besides Keith at Keith's Barbershop. My friend Christian Circle, been with us since day one. Keith's Barbershop, located 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Download the app The Cut book an appointment with Christian today, or you can do walk-in with Tony or Ashley. But again, Keeks Barbershop, 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Go check them out. Old school vibe in there. Absolutely love it. Cannot recommend them enough. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Maybe I'll see you there. Do you have interest in Steven Stamkos? Like, I jokingly put out a post about the Penguins signing 35-year-old Patrick Kane and 34-year-old Steven Stamkos. But genuinely, like, obviously not competing in that market. If he's going to get like a deal like that, that's crazy. I think anything beyond like 4 years is honestly pretty wild, and I wouldn't give him 4 years. But there's definitely a world where I'm like, yeah, Steven Stamkos for 2 or 3 years, sure. But I just don't even think that gets you into the like having a conversation with Steven Stamkos.
And that's the problem, right? Like, for one, I don't want the team to get older. I prefer that they get younger.
Sure.
And
I get it. Yeah.
And so just by that standpoint, the age standpoint, I don't want him. But for the value that he could bring as a hockey player, I understand that even with his age, he can still be a decent hockey player. But at the same time, I just don't think the Penguins are going to be there. If he's denying an 8-year contract with the Tampa Bay Lightning, I don't think that what he's looking for is something the Penguins are going to be able to offer. And maybe they're able to offer it, but I will be pissed if they do offer something like that. I don't think it's going to happen. Would I be interested in like a 2-year, $3 million deal? Sure. But he just denied an 8-year, $3 million deal. So I don't think it's in the cards for the Penguins with Steven Stamkos. Plus, at 34 years old, not the age I want to be handing out a long-term contract for. Like, if he's seriously wanting like a 6-7 year contract at 34 years old, I'm good. The Penguins have enough of those longer contracts that they're still playing out on some of these players. The team is as old as it is already. I don't want to continue to have that age go up with Steven Stamkos on the Penguins. So I wouldn't be interested in him, but there are a few guys that I am interested in. One guy I just want to get out of the way right now, just because he's not somebody that I think we're going to realistically talk about as a reunion with the Penguins. But did you see the number that came out about Jake Guentzel's contract that was being discussed with Carolina? It was also
Elliot Friedman.
Yeah. 8 years, $8 million. I'll be really interested to see if that gets done, because to me that seems like a discount for Carolina and Jake Guentzel. I don't know if that's the case. If Jake is fine with that number, I don't know why Carolina hasn't put the contract in front of him yet. Because I would only think that by July 1st, by Monday, Jake's phone is going to be blowing up, and he's going to be getting $9 million plus per year contract offers. So if that's the case, then what's the holdup?
Well, yeah, he's going to have to get 9+ to match that, because he can only get 7 years from anybody besides Carolina. So if he's looking for 8x8, $64 million, he's going to have to get at least 9.3 per year on 7 to be able to get that same amount. So, yeah, I mean, definitely that's definitely the way that I'm looking at it. But I thought he would still be looking at, over 9 million even for the 8 years with Carolina. I mean, when you look at Aho's deal, just some of these other deals that have been signed around the league, what they're projecting for Sam Reinhart on the open market or with Florida, 8 years, 9.5 per. Like, I don't know. I mean, I get that age plays into it. Reinhart's a bigger player, so maybe they're thinking, his game will age better than Jake Guentzel's will. I didn't realize how big of a dude Reinhart was. 6'3", 215 is what he's listed as. Guentzel's, a little bit smaller frame. Obviously, he's been beaten up a little bit over his career, and people knock him for his size. Yeah, I don't know. I wonder where the Penguins were even at with Jake Guentzel before trading him, to be honest. Like, when I heard Elliot Friedman say that is where my mind went to. Along with, once I put out the post, I got a couple responses that made sense. It's probably not so much the years or the money. It's probably about where the, no movement clause or no trade clauses are coming into it from Guentzel's side.
Mm-hmm. Well, the interesting to me is I don't know if a contract was ever even rendered.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
From the Penguins. I don't know if a number was ever actually thrown out there. I think that there's a good case that it was more or less we just don't think there's a future here with you and with extending you. We're trying to improve this team, and we don't think that extending you is going to be in the cards for that. I think that that's probably more likely than being offered a contract and it being a lowball offer. Because to be honest, if a contract was offered, we would have heard it by now. We would have known that number. That would have been leaked by somebody that the Penguins had offered Jake Guentzel this prior to the trade deadline, and we would have been discussing it. We would have known already. The fact that I don't think a contract was ever offered. I think it was more or less like, hey, Jake, we appreciate what you did with the Penguins, but with the future, we're thinking we're moving in a different direction. And I don't think with a contract was ever even given to Jake Guentzel's team, which is a shame because a guy like Jake Guentzel, I feel like the discussion of a contract should have been at least been on the table. But if it wasn't on the table at all, which to me just seems more likely looking at how things played out in the discussion that around Jake Guentzel now, I think that it's a shame that that's how it was handled. And I can understand why Jake Guentzel would be upset after the fact if that's how it was handled. And I did see in Yoey's like top 5 free agent targets for the Penguins, or 5 they could look at. He did include Jake Guentzel because he felt like he had to at that point. But a Jake Guentzel reunion, he said, would take not only the Penguins wanting to offer it, but Jake Guentzel getting over the fact that Dubas did not offer him an extension that he was wanting. So I feel like if Yoey or someone like that hasn't even put out the numbers of what could have been offered, because we know those numbers all the time with these players. If a contract is offered, we know about it. I just don't think there was one.
Yeah, you're probably right. And again, like it obviously wouldn't be to them like not wanting him. I think it would just be about them kind of thinking, does the timeline match up? You know, with when the rest of this core is going to be on their way out, we're probably going to be bad. I mean, I don't know if they want to admit that, but that's likely what's going to happen. Do we want to have Guentzel's contract attached to us at that point?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I get it. I would have loved to have had Guentzel here. I would have rather them re-signed him than not, but that's not the spot that we're in. So,
and that's the thing. You look at, I tweeted out today, you look at the contract that Carolina is giving out. Even if you upped it to $9 million or $9.3 million, like you said, to match the actual total of the contract.
Yeah.
The Penguins could match that. They're not going to, and I don't know that Jake would necessarily want it. It would take some healing on both sides from Jake and Kyle Dubas, but Penguins could, if they wanted to, match that. I just don't think that they're going to.
Right. So, we'll see what they decide to do in free agency. If they maybe move some salary out in the trades that we talked about, if they will be spenders. As it pertains to free agency, have you given any thought to names that you feel like this guy makes sense? Like, we know we're looking for some help in the middle to bottom 6. Is there anybody that jumps off the page to you that looks like they're going to hit free agency and you think makes sense?
My number one guy, and I don't think it's close that my number one guy is this guy, but anybody else, is Max Domi. I would love to see Max Domi on the Penguins.
I feel like every year he's connected to the Penguins, by the way.
He has. And
because of his dad's relationship with Mario.
And he has had, 6 or 7 teams in the last 7-ish years.
Pretty crazy.
It's pretty crazy. But I don't think it's all been his fault. That's just kind of how the cards have been played to him. Max Domi, I think, makes a ton of sense. I think he makes sense from an identity standpoint of how they want their team to be playing. He is a skilled guy, but also can be a physical guy. Gets that from his father. And I think that when you look at the middle 6, he would be a great third-line center. He would add scoring touch, and I don't think he's going to cost all that much. I'm looking at probably like a 3-year deal within the $3 to $4 million range. Maybe 4 is a little too rich, but if you can get him like 3.5, 3.75, I think that a 3-year deal at that would be really good. And maybe you do have to add on like a fourth year because free agency, you're basically bidding for these guys. But Max Domi to me makes a ton of sense, especially because I've talked about how I've enjoyed Lars Eller as center on the Penguins. But if you can make Lars Eller your full-time fourth-line center, I feel way better about that. And I think he's a really good 4C for the Penguins. And if you can have Max Domi as your third-line center, and then you have guys that could potentially come up to the NHL and take over spots in that lineup. If Max Domi gets taken over a spot at third line center, he has the ability to be able to bounce to the wings as well and be a productive player there. He is someone that I feel like you just mentioned it. He's connected to the Penguins. It seems like every single year. I think it makes too much sense for the type of player he is, the style of play he can bring, and what he is going to cost. I think that he would be the perfect acquisition for the Penguins.
If I'm the Penguins, I just go like offer sheet somebody. It doesn't happen, but Lucas Raymond's an RFA. Seth Jarvis is an RFA. Just go nuts. Just go piss somebody off. No, but seriously, some of the names that I've thought about, it's funny you mentioned Max Domi because I've thought about a couple of other players that have also been linked to, I almost said the Steelers for some reason, the Penguins in the past, and it's never come to fruition. Like Anthony Duclair, I think makes sense for what they're looking for, plays both wings. I feel like he's older than this, 28 years old. I thought he was older than that. 42 points last year, 24 goals, 18 assists, finished out in Tampa Bay after being traded there in the second half of the season. A name that was mentioned in a potential Jake Guentzel trade when Edmonton was in the mix, Warren Foegele, also hitting free agency, had a 20-goal season last year. And the name that I want to bring up too, and this is more so because I've seen them linked to him. Now, depending on what he's going to get on the open market, don't know that it's somebody that I really want them to be in the market for. Jake DeBrusk. We've heard that name in the past too. When there was like a potential three-way trade that people were talking about with Guentzel, and then even going like into Reilly Smith conversations as well. DeBrusk coming off an okay season, 19 goals, 21 assists, but never really lived up to what we thought he was going to be as a player. I feel like in Boston after the first couple of years, 27 years old, another guy that has experience playing on both wings. But it's been put out there that the Penguins like him quite a bit and will definitely be in on him when July 1st hits. Boston, it came out, there was an article that I just found that Boston expects him to test the free agent market. So it sounds like he's definitely hitting the open market and will be out there. I mean, going through, man, like
there's a couple of the guys that I'd be interested in. This one would be more of a bottom six move, and it's a name that everybody listening to this is probably familiar with. Anthony Beauvillier is a free agent, and he's only 27 years old. He had several solid seasons with the New York Islanders as a bottom six player. And I think that he could be an asset and an improvement in their bottom six. Like we talked about last week, there's probably going to be at least 3 to 4 spots in that bottom six that they need replacing. I think that that's somebody that they could sign for cheap because he had a down season last year, playing on 3 different teams, by the way. He played for Vancouver, Chicago, and Nashville last year. So I think they could sign him for cheap, and that's somebody that I think that could provide value and defensive value as well to the team. You look at the way that he played on the Islanders and the way that the Islanders play in general, all those guys, they play defensive minded and they're shutdown hockey. I think that's something that could be of value to the Penguins when you look at what he could provide to the bottom six. And then the other one, kind of along the same vine of Jake DeBrusk, being that solid player, kind of up and down at times, but not sure what he's going to actually cost, is Tyler Bertuzzi. I think that's another one that you look at your top six could improve, and somebody that you could realistically sign, but I don't know what exactly bidding war you're going to get into when you talk about Tyler Bertuzzi. He could warrant too much money per year than the Penguins are willing/able to offer. But that's another one that I would like keep an eye on as far as like the big fish go in free agency. But as far as someone that is not, I guess, more under the radar and not going to be one of those like big name people, I would be interested in Anthony Beauvillier. Another one that had been floated out a ton recently, especially to the Penguins. A lot of people were talking about him was Dakota Joshua from Vancouver, but he actually just signed a contract the other day. So he's going to be off the table and not an option anymore. But I still think there's some solid players to be had in free agency. I don't want the Penguins to overpay, but I think that there are people that they could bring in and improve their lineup immediately with some of these players. But yeah, my guy moving forward until he signed to a different team, Max Domi. Put him in a Penguin uniform. I would love it.
I honestly feel like he's just going to re-up in Toronto. But, I mean, yeah, you're right. Until he actually re-signs, why not? If that's your guy, you can hope that it comes to fruition. Anthony Mantha had a little bit of a bounce back last year. 23 goals, 21 assists, got traded to Vegas at the end of last year. He's expected to hit free agency, but I almost wonder, with kind of the dip that he has had in play, even with a little bit of a bounce back taking place, like, could he be a guy that maybe signs like a 1-year deal trying to bounce back? And if so, I don't hate the idea of that 1-year deal being with the Penguins.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a case. He had 44 points last year. So pretty solid season overall compared to his season in Washington's. I just don't think things in Washington worked out like they thought it would, especially from what he was able to do in Detroit before going to Washington. So I would be interested in that. I think that's somebody that could work out. Honestly, there's definitely a lot of people I'm interested in free agency. I just don't know when I see contracts, I don't know how interested in them I'll be, because I don't love the whole aura around. I know you hate that word. I just
you used it in a sense that makes makes sense. I hate when people just use it when they're saying like a player gives off
as aura.
Yeah.
No, I don't like the aura around free agency and the whole idea that you're going to have to overpay to get these guys. I mean, look at what happened with Ryan Graves last year. And overpaying, that can be decided during the season too, whether you're actually overpaying for these guys based off their play. Like Ryan Graves, did we love the contract when it was signed? Not really, but I don't think it was as bad as it was until he started playing and we were watching him and be like, oh, wait, this is actually terrible. So
yeah, the dollar amount I don't think that we took as much issue with, but it was, again, like, what's up with the 5 and 6 year deals that everybody gets in free agency lately? And that's like you're saying, that's kind of what scares you off in a lot of these deals. You're almost adding 1 year just because you're winning the bidding war on the player in free agency, if it's somebody that even has multiple suitors. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out. By the time that we talk next week, Penguins could look quite a bit different. So yeah, going to be an interesting week ahead for the Penguins. Any closing thoughts?
No, just don't do anything stupid, Kyle. I don't really care what you do in the draft, because, I mean, those players are going to be playing on a bad hockey team anyway by the time they get to the NHL. Just don't do anything stupid at free agency.
I love it. Sound advice from Tyler Weech to Kyle Dubas, who looks very different, by the way. Have you seen pictures of him at the draft? Oh, man. Okay, yeah, you got to pull up a picture as I play this Everything Custom Designs promo and then play the outro so we can get out of here. But of course, everybody be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, do all that stuff. Hit us in the comments with your thoughts on what we talked about, who you would like to see the team target and trade or free agency. But yeah, let me tell you something about one of our favorite sponsors, Haley Wagner, Everything Custom Designs. Need a custom t-shirt, hoodie, tumbler? Stop what you're doing. Don't go anywhere else. Check out the link in the description. Everything Custom Designs. Our friend Haley Wagner, small business. She can do all that for you. She even does around the 412 merch, t-shirts, hoodies, long sleeve tees, bunch of different stuff. I even got a tumbler from her as well. So go check out the link in the description. Goes directly to her Facebook page. All of her stuff can be found there. Again, Everything Custom Designs. Haley Wagner. She does great work. Can't recommend her enough. Go check it out.
Also, he needs to put his glasses back on.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks very different without him. Big news regarding Everything Custom Designs. I don't know if you're ready for this because you don't know this either. She messaged me this past week. She got a new piece of equipment. She can now do hats.
Whoa! We can never do the ongoing joke.
I guess we could say, like, so we have to get also we're gonna have a new link in the description because we got shorts now. It's summer. We got shorts, 3 different colors. Same style of short. They're like athletic shorts, but
Yeah.
black, gray, white around the 412 shorts, double-sided logos. So it's like the logo that you guys kind of see in the background right now on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, is on the front, and then the circular logo on the back as well. So pretty sweet looking. Be sure to grab yourself a pair. But yeah, Haley is now going to be doing hats as well. So
We love it.
be on the lookout for around the 412 hats from her in the very near future. You know, I wouldn't consider her and the person that I did a custom order for some hats already for competitors. I didn't know Haley was doing hats at this time, so I feel a little bit bad about it, but not really. So we're just gonna have a bunch of around the 412 hats. That's the way it's gonna work.
There we go.
Like I said, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, hit us in the comments. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there so you get a notification every time that we post a new episode. Follow us everywhere, Twitter, Instagram. Yes, I'm going against the grain in saying Twitter instead of X. I don't care. If you type in twitter.com, guess where it takes you? X. So get over it. TikTok, Facebook, all those places. Again, we appreciate you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Around the 412 Penguin Show. For Tyler and myself, be sure to tap in with us. If you are a Steelers or Pirates fan, go collect another video. We'll see you next time.